Chapter 4, Part 3. So, we're going to get into the historical context and physical surroundings, also method of encounter. Um, this particular piece is a Rembrandt piece, and it was called The Night Watch for a long time. But what it actually is um, a group of soldiers going to go into a parade during the day. Parades are usually in the middle of the day or in the morning. It's in a space that doesn't have a lot of windows, but a lot of this dark area here was even made darker because it was hung in a building that had a lot of smoke, and the soot from the fireplace darkened the picture further. So a lot of people thought it was called the Night Watch, and they were going out on a night excursion. Okay, but that was one of those things to find out later what this actual piece was referring to. These are a merchant class. These are not nobles. This is not nobility, and this was a shift in the end of the Renaissance, because here he is in 1642, end of Renaissance, beginning of Baroque era, and in Holland, especially Northern Europe, there wasn't as much of um, this focus on the wealthy elite as much as there was on the merchant class. Now, they were sort of the wealthy elite. It's a little bit of a confusing topic, but it wasn't just nobility and kings and queens and also religious leaders. So you're starting to get a merchant class that is rising. They're starting to have some money, and they're wanting paintings of themselves on a grand scale. And if we go back one more time, sorry about this, it's an 11-foot high by 14-foot wide painting. It's massive. Okay? So its historical significance is documenting the middle class. All right, onward. So context, we have an Iranian artist here, and she is taking pen and ink and she is drawing on top of photographs. Now, I'm not entirely sure if this is part of the photograph or if she collaged this in. I was never quite clear on that. But her series called Women of Allah is concerned with Islamic women, and women's rights are limited. So we have this picture of this face, and the writing on top of it is religious writing, because in Iran, in particular, Middle Eastern countries all have different histories, but in particular in Iran, in the 70s, there was freedom. Women were wearing westernized clothing, and then you had the Shah of Iran went into exile. He came to the U.S., and then you have the Ayatollah Khomeini, who was a religious figure, come in and take over, very conservative, and that was the rise of Islam in a political and extremist way in the Middle Eastern area. And so we're looking at a woman's face, and then we have all this religious writing. So in a way, a woman's face is repressed in Iran. You can no longer look at a woman's face. There is a veil over it, and it's a religious veil, so this is religious writing, if that makes sense to you. Now, the other read of this, the other contextual aspect of this at this point in time in history is, when we think about Islam as a Westerner, and this image is to be shown in the West, we are thinking that there's a gun pointed at us. We think of all Islamic people as dangerous. It's a generalization we make. That we think everybody's a jihadist or a radical Islamic person. So an Islamic face looking at you has a gun pointed at you. Now, they're not all quite this confrontational or this complex, but there are often guns and script in her photos. Okay. Physical surroundings. Location is important when you think about the meaning of the piece. I talked a little bit about how a pottery piece would be put in a museum. We are going to look at that. But these, I love these. Are gorgeous. They're just so amazing. So this is a waterfall taken out of context. So we know of waterfalls as like the height of natural beauty, and we go and we seek them out. We go hike back into the woods, even in the desert, we have some waterfalls, and that's a really beautiful natural element. When we take it out of the context of in the mountains, we put it right into an urban setting. It has a really dramatic uh, effect on us. We really notice this thing, and we really start to contemplate the fact that we're in such an urban environment. Now, there really is water down here. New York City is an island, and it is surrounded by water. And one of the ideas behind this piece was to bring people back to the waterfronts and to understand that they are surrounded by water, because New York City in itself is so intense and so um, so much activity and so many places to go within the city. You kind of forget that it is an island surrounded by water. So that's one of the points here of this piece. And of course, using this scaffolding scaffolding that's metallic and industrial looking, as opposed to maybe some logs or some naturalistic looking rocks. He's really going for the drama of that contrast. Now, method of encounter, this is unusual to our author. I haven't really thought about this a whole lot, but it is quite true. How you come to a place. Now, in this particular um, palace, this is very high up. I want to say it's about 10,000 feet, but I'm not 100% sure. I have hiked in Nepal, which is very close to Tibet, and that region is very high. It's called subtropical, and I know that sounds strange. They could grow things like oranges down here, but it's quite high, and there is snow, of course, in the wintertime. But it's a really funny sort of a mixture of tropical and alpine mixed together. It's an unusual situation. But at any rate, how you're going to perceive this palace, how you're going to see it, is going to be very different. Say, for instance, if you were there, and our author mentions the altitude, which is my point in mentioning the tropical nature or the height of this place, you're going to be wheezing and short of breath because you're used to living at sea level. And then you're going to be walking up these steps and you're going to be exhausted, and it's going to take a lot of effort. You're not going to be able to see the palace when you're going up these steps. You're only going to be seeing a segment of it. We're far away and we're looking at this nice, um, you might say, Kodak moment of it from a distance. Okay, and this is a drum, and it's in a museum. So this is changing the context for this piece. It's a visually stunning object, yes, absolutely, but that is not what it was intended for, to be looked at. Similar to those masquerade, the masks from the African culture, this is a Vietnamese drum, and it's supposed to be drummed on and struck in order to make a sound for a ceremony. And now that we've taken it out and put it in this museum in France, it's not making a sound anymore. So we don't really understand that in its original context. So we're limited, but it does show some of the iconography of the culture and some of the details of the inscriptions on this piece. Okay, I'm going to go to the next PowerPoint.